Hi there, grade 12s, and welcome to today's video in which we are going to be just going through the theory modules. Now, I have already put out a video dealing with a theory test that covers term 1, which is module 1.1 to 1.4. So I'm going to be going through those modules now, and when you latch up the two, you'll be fully prepared, not just for term 1, but when you are in term 2 or term 3 and you're looking to revise on these terms, this is going to be an awesome resource for you. So let's get started. All right, so again, I'm not going to go through explaining every single detail, but rather I'm just going to touch on some of the big things and possible questions that usually come up on these topics. Okay, so module 1.1, we looked at why we use computers. Okay, you need to know those three things. You need to know the fact that we use computers because they are more efficient, they are more accurate, they are more reliable. But think of it in the broader sense as well, not just computers, but IT as a whole. Remember, we're talking about ICT. So the fact that they save time, labor, resources, we can pop in mass production as well. This is what machines have helped us to do. And then there's obviously the reliability that goes with that. It's also improved communication. Think about 20, 30 years ago. How were people communicating? 50 years ago, how were people communicating? And how are they doing it now? Now you're finding that people, in fact, the world has become a lot smaller because we are able to interact with each other no matter where we are in the world. Okay, so you've got communication costs that are saved, etc. And then we've got the different types of computer systems. But when we go into this, the first thing they always touch on is basically what you need to know before buying or comparing computers. And remember, when we talk about computers, we're talking about laptops, desktops, notebooks, smartphones, tablets. We're talking about all of those devices. So when we are looking at buying one, when they give us a scenario to ask, should the person be buying this particular machine, they'll give us a scenario, tell us what the person's going to be doing with it. And that is of the utmost importance, because what is it going to be used for determines everything. Guys, if you're going to be buying a laptop that is for gaming, then what do you need? You need specialized hardware. You need a particular operating system. You need a certain amount of RAM. If you're just going to be doing, sort of basic things at home, again, that will also determine the hardware that you will buy. So these are important questions to ask. And if it does come up in the scenario with us, you'll know how to answer it. All right, then we deal with non-portable computers. So these are computers that are large in size. They are not meant to be moved around. They are generally more powerful than their portable counterparts, but the portable ones have an all-in-one design. So when we talk about all-in-one, we're talking about your laptop, the fact that your monitor, your keyboard, your mouse, it's all built into one device. All right. With your non-portable computers, examples of things like your desktops and your servers. And then very importantly, and maybe let me just move myself out of the way here, we also have the entry-level computer. Now, this is something that has been asked before. What is an entry-level computer? So it's either going to be 2 or 3 marks, right, for this. First thing you need to say is it's the cheapest computer to purchase in a range, right? In that particular range, it is going to be the cheapest one to buy. It's also got lower hardware specifications. So already there we have 2. But if it's going to be 3 marks, you will have to add the software, the fact that it comes with home edition software. Okay, so the hardware is the lowest spec in that range, or it's the cheapest in that range. The hardware specs are the lowest, and even the software is on the lower end of the scale. That is an entry-level computer. In other words, the most basic one that you can get in that range. Right. Moving on. Then we have portable computers. We know it's got an all-in-one design. It's got your keyboard, mouse, everything in. It folds away like your laptop. So when you think portable, just think of your laptop, right? Laptop, notebook, Chromebook, any of these smartphones and phablets and tablets will also fall into that. Very importantly, then we have our categories of users, and you need to know the different users, especially where you are going to be facing questions dealing with scenarios. Okay, so we have the personal user. You can see the personal user really uses the PC for the absolute basic things. Right, absolute basic things. So we've got limited office tasks, not even the kind of things you doing in CAT. right? Limited office tasks. Then we've got our Soho user. This is a person that is using the PC for a little home office. Could be something small. It's generally something small, not big, office work, hardware intensive, nothing like that. Because look at what they say. They'll generally use an entry-level computer. And we know that's on the lowest spec of software and hardware, and it's cheap. So it's going to be doing a little bit of accounting, some database work, some document archiving, maybe some planning and scheduling, but light stuff for someone who wants to start maybe a little home business. Then we have our power users. So our power users are the ones that are going to be using more processor intensive, more hardware intensive equipment. This sometimes is determined by the software. So for example, you want to do a lot of video editing, then you will need the corresponding hardware to go with it. Right, so you are going to need the corresponding hardware and possibly software to go with that type of machine. So can you see when we talk about what is it going to be used for, when we ask that question, it does lead to us answering that question and then buying the appropriate piece of hardware. Right, let's go. Mobile users. Similar to our personal user, you'll see this is the person that is always on the move, using their smartphone and tablet. That's why they call them mobile users. They'll be browsing the internet, playing games. Now, when you take a look at these, it is similar to your personal user. Also, sort of light usage, but they are mobile users because now, remember, with your personal user, that can be someone using a desktop machine. Doesn't have to be somebody using a laptop, right? It can be someone using a desktop machine. So your mobile users are ones who are doing those things, but more on the mobile devices, like your smartphones and tablets. Convergence, always a term you need to know. Remember, it's the trend of all these different technologies coming through into one device. They are combined into a single device. So please remember that, be able to give a few examples of that as well. On the hardware side, they talk about the information processing cycle, and now we go specifically into hardware. We know the information processing cycle, guys, be able to identify the steps. You don't have to put it in order, but be able to explain them and be able to give an example as well. Okay, you can see communication is being thrown in from grade 11, where we are dealing with our internet and our ADSL and fiber connections as well. That is where communication comes in. All right. Then they mentioned to us in the bottom right hand corner, I found this in one of the tests as well. They were asking, how do computers turn data into information? Now we know data is raw facts. Information is our processed data, right? Turning it into something meaningful. So they just mentioned it to us that computers take that raw data and process it into information which is then meaningful, right? And that is how it moves from data to information. All right, so we've got input. They go through this again and again, guys. Just go and read through this. Make sure you acquaint yourself with this. We know this from grade 10 and 11, so I'm not going to go through it again. But they do mention something interesting here, where you are combining the input sources and output destinations. So here they tell us that most ICT systems use multiple input sources and output destinations. We look at our smartphone. Our smartphone or tablet may have sensors that detect movement and allow you to touch, right? They also have on-screen controls. Think about your point of sale system. Your point of sale system allows you to type in, information, and at the same time, it is allowing you to do what? To scan barcodes. Then you've also got musicians. Musicians might connect to some sort of MIDI device, right? So they connect in that and they're able to use that. So just bear that in mind as well. Then we've got our processing. This is where we know the processing involves things like searching, sorting, comparisons, and what's helping you do this. The RAM and the CPU is working in the background to make sure that you can do that. Storage, most of us know everything about storage. We know storage is a place where we save our files and folders to. It is permanent in the sense that when you switch your PC off, those files are still there. Okay. There are different types of storage media. When we talk about storage media, we're talking about the collective term for all the different types of storage. So when I say storage media, It could be a hard drive, a SSD, a flash drive, or an external hard drive. Right, then they talk about input devices. Many of these we already know, but I want you to see that there is now a distinct difference in these. So let's go and have a look. First one we looked at is a keyboard. Now we know what the keyboard does, we know its advantages, but guys, what they throw in now is the limitations. This is where things like troubleshooting is also going to come up. So while we know everything about the keyboard, and we know how it connects to the PC, same with the mouse, same with a lot of these other devices, just focus on the limitations and troubleshooting, because that's where a lot of the questions come from. So there they give us some limitations, and they also talk about buying decisions, like factors to consider when buying, like we mentioned before with our computer. But troubleshooting, look at it, sticky keys getting stuck. The keyboard not working, maybe it's not plugged into the correct port. Maybe you have broken the cable. Maybe there's something wrong with the port. If it's wireless, it presents a whole lot of other problems because the batteries might be flat. You might have the little dongle broken, or it's in the incorrect port, or it's missing, any of those things. And the same is going to take effect when it comes to the mouse, right? Same story. If it's a wireless mouse, it's going to be susceptible to the same things. Batteries, dongle, is it in the correct port? All those things. So just bear that in mind. Then our touchscreen, which is a combination of input and output, because I'm looking at the screen, I'm getting everything out of it, but at the same time, I'm using the screen to input my commands and instructions. So have a look at the limitations, right? Familiarize yourself with that. Also the touchpad. Remember, the touchpad replaces the mouse. Now, it's not as accurate, it's not as nice to work with, but it's there. Okay. Our scanners. Right now we know what our scanners do, and we know scanners take our physical media, so our things like books, pages, letters, anything like that, and it scans it in and converts it to a digital format in our PC. Now, in years gone by, we couldn't edit that. But now with the help of OCR software, or optical character recognition software, we can scan in a document, and through that software, it reads the letters on the page and gives me a document that I can actually edit. So please remember, you can only edit if you've got your scanner and the OCR software together. That's how you can create an editable document by scanning it in. Now, there are great advantages to your scanner and other uses. Please go through that. There is a troubleshooting section as well. Now, I want to just stop here and say that most of your peripherals, and we know what peripherals are. Yes, we do. Our peripherals are anything outside of our system unit that connects to it, right? And most of the things that connect to our system unit are connected via USB. So when you think of your scanner, just remember there's a USB cable running through to the PC. There's power. So it could be that the power's off. The power's not plugged in properly. The USB cable is broken. USB cable is not plugged in properly. The scanner itself is maybe switched off, or it could even have, and I know some of them have a lock switch that might be on, right? So these are all the different things to consider. Then we have our digital camera. Most of us know how the digital camera works, right? So I'm not going to go into the uses and advantages. We look at the limitations. Remember, the photos are easy to lose, because if we lose the camera, it's gone. And the quality of the photos depends on the quality of the camera. That's very important, even when we look at our phones. We have some buying decisions, and when we look at buying a digital camera, what do? We look at the resolution, the quality. Many of you do that when it comes to your cell phone. Yes, you did. You did that. Yes. First thing you looked at was the camera. Oh, it's a 50 megapixel. I want that. That's the last thing you look at. Anyway, the resolution, and then our image quality depends on three things: the color depth, bear that in mind, the sensor size, and the ISO rating. Guys, one of the biggest things when it comes to cameras is the amount of light that the lens actually allows into it over there. So that sensor size is big, that ISO rating is high. It means that you're going to have a lot more light coming through, which means the image is going to be clearer even when you are in low light conditions. Like, I've got my Canon camera over here, switch off my light, there's my low light conditions. Woohoo! Party in the dark. And then I switch on my light. Yay, I'm back. Okay, that's the kind of difference that your sensor size can make. So if you've got a very, very cool camera that's got lovely big sensor size, good ISO rating, then even when you are, let me actually turn this down, even when you start turning the light down, you can still end up getting a good quality picture out of it. Why? Because it's able to take in as much light as possible. And I mean, even on this Canon camera, I know there are certain lenses that in exactly the same position where I am now will let in 2 or 3 times the amount of light, but it does come at a bit of a cost. So we'll see. Right, and they just mentioned about life before digital. You can read through that. Don't really need to know much about that because they don't really ask you on that. Our webcams, we know our webcams, and generally our webcams just have one cable, USB cable that runs to the PC. That's it. We know what it's used for. We know the advantages. Look at the limitations. Some of them have low resolution, but not all of them. Right? Some of the newer ones have, they're on like 1080p, beautiful quality. So yeah, the very low resolution doesn't really make sense anymore, but it must be connected to some sort of device. Now, when you have issues with it, think about it this way. If there's only one cable, well, it can be the cable. It can be that it's not plugged into the correct port. Maybe the software is not using the correct camera. Sometimes you need to just restart the PC, and sometimes you need to just unplug it and plug it back in. Or if there's software that's using it, maybe just restarting that software program as well. Microphone, like I'm using over here, we know what that's used for. It's there to capture audio, and that's beautiful. We know what it's used for. We know the advantages. The limitations include the built-in microphones don't generally provide high quality sound. Again, guys, I'm not going to agree with that 100%. Because a lot of the new phones, I mean, this is a Samsung Note 20, and the mic on there is perfectly fine. I mean, I use it for some of the recordings, and it's been working very, very nicely. Difficult to use in noisy environments. I will agree with that. Okay, right. And then they mentioned to us at the bottom, the only troubleshooting comes when it's plugged into the wrong jack or set on mute. Okay, now I'm going to dispute that a little bit. Yes, it can be plugged into the wrong jack. Yes, it can be set on mute, but this microphone, for example, is a USB powered microphone. So I could be plugging it into the wrong port. I could have it not plugged in correctly over here. I could have the volume turned down. I could have the software not using the correct mic. Do you see where I'm going with this? Right? So think about it practically. Think about it logically. If I've got a setup like this, what could go wrong? And how would I be able to best solve that? Then I've got my output devices. And output, they tell us how an ICT device shows the results of processing. Okay, I'm not going to go into the monitor. We know our monitor. We know that our monitor's size is measured diagonally in inches. We know that the quality that we look at is in terms of resolution because it's made up by our pixels. That is important. Also the aspect ratio, whether it's 16:9 or that letterbox 4:3, that aspect ratio. That image quality, there they tell us, also depends on the color depth. The pixel density, that's an added thing now. Pixel density, the refresh rate, and the contrast ratio. Know those things, folks, in case they ask you that. I would say that that is important to know. And there they give us some troubleshooting. They give us the problems and the solutions. So acquaint yourself with that, right? Acquaint yourself with that. Make sure that you know those things. Speakers and headphones, we know this. We know the limitations. We know some of the problems that can arise, whether it is physically plugged in, whether it is via Bluetooth, maybe there's something interrupting the connection, anything like that. But that I think we are familiar with. Right. Then our printers. So our printers, we have laser, inkjet, and dot matrix. And don't worry about dot matrix because they really only ask. In fact, last year I did a video saying that the Department of Education said no more dot matrix. So just laser and inkjet. So laser works with a laser inside and a substance called toner. And that toner is like a powdery substance. What does it do? Between the two, it burns the image onto the page. That's why your pages come out warm when you print on a laser printer. The inkjet printer, it physically sprays ink onto the page. That's why your pages come out wet, right? So inkjets are for color printing, high quality color printing. Your laser is just to get bulk copies. So just bulk black and white printing. You do get color lasers, but they are very expensive. Our printers plug in via a USB cable and power. So again, problems that can arise. The printer's not switched on. The printer's not plugged in. The USB cable is not plugged in. There might be an issue with the printer and the software drivers. Remember what a driver is? Not that guy that takes you from A to B. No, not the Uber driver. No, not that one. It's a piece of software that tells Windows how to work with that piece of hardware. If that driver is not doing its job, it can create problems. Maybe you're not even choosing the correct driver, right? I saw one question that said, how does the settings on a printer influence green computing? So remember with green computing, we said we recycle the cartridges, the hardware. We refill the ink cartridges. We print on both sides of the page. We print using the least amount of ink. So those things, when it comes to settings, you're printing double-sided and the amount of ink you're going to use, those are things that will play a role in green computing. Bear that in mind. Right, so some factors to consider when we buy. We want to look at how fast the printer is in terms of pages per minute, whether it's color, black and white, the resolution, the cost per page. Sometimes you're working with some of those big printers. When you look at the cost per page, the paper that it can handle, whether it's compatible with your operating system, and whether you want, a mobile printer, whether you want a wireless one, cabled one, it all depends on what are you going to be doing with that device. Same question we asked when we bought the PC. Okay? Same question. Then we've got 3D printing. Now we know that this is a printer that creates physical 3D form. So it will print out a physical 3-dimensional object for me. Now, as lovely as that is, just understand they are expensive. It takes long to print. So those are just some of the limitations. And when it comes to troubleshooting, it's not as simple as the things we've mentioned now. It's pretty tricky, and it's hard to solve some of the problems that are there. And there's many factors involved in that. So just bear that in mind. All right, then we've got our data projector. Again, we know what it's used for. We know the advantage. Some of us have it in our classes. The limitations are things like the resolution. If there's too much light in the room, it can interfere with the image that's thrown up against the wall, right? The images are not as bright as those of high quality display monitors. This is why in some, I think, let me use the example of churches. There are a lot of churches that have moved away from projectors to actually using TV screens because they get a better quality picture out of that. Plus it lasts longer because with a data projector, it has a bulb that has a lifespan, right? So you need to just bear that in mind. Storage devices, guys, these we know what our hard drive is by now. We've done grade 10 and 11 CAT. We know the limitations. We know that we can have things, or problems like the hard drive being full. We need to clear that, right? The system can seem very slow. We need to use disk defragmentation, and you can have corrupt files, okay? So those are just some of the things that we can pick up. Our external hard drive, we know what an external hard drive does. We know that it's not as small as a flash drive, but it gives us portability, right? And I wouldn't say it drains the battery power on the laptop, but okay, let's go with that for now. In our flash drive, very simple to use. All of us know that. Just bear in mind, it's more expensive per gig than hard drives. Please remember that, right? It's also easy to lose. Then they mentioned social and ethical considerations. Please go and watch my other video where I deal with the test paper for term 1, and you'll see why this is there. All right, then we've got a solid state drive. Please, this is very important. They only ask you really on the solid state drive and with a solid state in comparison to your normal hard drive. So this one is completely electronic. It's an electronic alternative to your hard drive. It's faster. It is more expensive. There are no moving parts. It is much more energy efficient. But again, I'm emphasizing that it is more expensive than your traditional hard drive. Then we've got optical media. And this is generally only brought in because of the size differences. So our optical media, this is something that needs a specific drive to read it, right? So our CDs and DVDs needs a CD or DVD drive in order to read the information from that disk. They are slow. They are easily damaged. They have low storage capacity. So this is why it has really basically been phased out, and we really only use it when we like in a real jam. Because if you look at it, most laptops and desktops don't even have these drives anymore. Some of the troubleshooting, you can just read through that. A lot of this is not even really relevant anymore. Then decisions about storage. There are some pertinent questions to ask. What size hard drive do you need? Again, I'm going to go back to that same thing. What are you going to be doing with this device? So how much storage do you need? Do you need an optical drive? Most of us know. Do you need to write to disks? Yes, if you do, then you need an optical drive, right? So all of these are just questions that need to be asked in order for you to make the right decision. Guys, don't just go out and buy something, even when it's on a Black Friday sale. Think before you spend. All right. When we look at communication devices like our cellular modems, some of you might have seen these things, others not. They're just about that size. You've got your little dongle. And you used to get the old ones that plugged into a USB port and had a SIM card in them. So to plug into a USB port on your PC, you'd have software open it up. These days, you don't even need that. These devices are standalone. They create little Wi-Fi, zones. You can then connect to that and then connect to the internet. We also have the things that some of us have at home, which is our ADSL and fiber routers. Please, this is a router that you are seeing in the picture over there, right? You will have a physical cable running from that, connecting you to whoever your ISP or your internet service provider is. Those antennae are there to provide a Wi-Fi zone using that signal that is coming in. Okay, so you'll see on some routers, and I'll show you mine maybe in a different video. It's got 3 massive antenna. Why? Because it gives me a much larger Wi-Fi range within my house. Okay, so we've got ADSL and fiber. Please remember, ADSL is slower than fiber. Fiber uses fiber optic cables, and it transmits the data via light. Our ADSL is still using normal network cables around about Cat6, and the data is transmitted via cables. Okay, electrical signals going through cables. Right, then we move on to 1.3, hardware recommendations. We've spoken a lot about this already. Considerations when buying a computer. So you can go and read through that. We have spoken, I think, in detail about this already. We look at things like our system unit, our CPU. We know what that is there for. Guys, do you see what's happening now? They are starting to combine these things. They're taking our hardware factors. They're giving us some more details on it. And they're throwing in a user who would be looking at things like this. Right there, they mentioned the personal user, Soho, the power user. Right? There is a typical example of our RAM, our memory. Now, when I look at this, I can see this is a Corsair. That's the manufacturer. Corsair memory. And the model is a DDR. So that refers to the speed of this RAM. I can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 slots. This is a motherboard that can handle up to 6 gigabits per second in terms of processing capacity that can run through that. So very nice. That Corsair memory is very expensive, by the way. Okay, so our memory, our RAM, they tell us what the RAM is. We know that, right? These are things that come up as questions. Okay, so please know this. Okay, it can be there. It's there for any user because every user uses RAM, right? The power users will require more. Okay, think about the gaming guys. Think about the video editing people. They are going to be using a lot more RAM. Then inside our system unit, we've got then our hard drive, and you can see inside our hard drive, we've got our disks that are spinning similar to our old LP players. Our hard disk drive, permanent storage area. This is what it does. It gives us some more info on that, guys, and just tells us, yes, every user is going to be using this unless you're going for a solid state drive. So again, it all depends on what you are going to be doing with it. Then we've got our graphics card. This is a dedicated graphics card. It's a physical card extra to what you have built in on your motherboard. So you can see on it there, we've got an output to VGA, DVI, and then HDMI. So this card can output to 3 separate devices. If I've got 3 monitors, this one card actually pushes that signal out. You can see it's got its own fan as well. A lot of these cards have their own memory as well, right? Some of them have their own graphics processor built onto it because of what it needs to do, right? So video cards, separate circuit board that plugs into the motherboard. Entry-level computers have them built in. When you're dealing with power users, you need that extra bit, right? Especially for 3D graphics. Then we've got our DVD drives. These are examples over here. These are examples of optical drives. They read the CDs. There's a little laser in them that reads the contents on the CD. The CD and DVD is an example of optical media. But these are the physical drives that we need for them. So again, you can just go and read through that. Major over there. Then our ports. We just need to know some of our ports that we find on the back of the PC as well. So please go and check out some pictures. Familiarize yourself with some of these. There we've got our, let me go this way. We've got our USB port. We've got our network card. There's our sound card over there as well. We've got Thunderbolt ports. We've got a VGA port. These are specific video ports over there to transfer video files. So please just know what these things are there for. Okay, be able to identify those ports. Then our system unit is our case, our tower, but we call it a system unit. We don't really have much of a choice in that when we go and buy, unless we're building something custom made. All right, as is the case there. All right, the design of the case, just remember that, affects airflow and the cooling of the computer. This is why when you look at gaming computers, you see they've got a whole lot of fans in them. Some are even water cooled because of the processing that's happening there on a constant and consistent basis. Then we have devices that connect to our computer. Let me just move myself there. Okay. We've got our mouse and keyboard. Now, I'm sure I don't have to tell you anything about that, right? Except just to mention the ergonomically designed keyboards and mice that are available. We've got our monitors. Again, guys, you can go and read through this. These are things that we have covered. Our printers and who's going to be using them. Very importantly, know what type of user will use which printer. A laser printer will be for someone who's going to print a lot of copies in black and white. Soon as they go over to color, they need to go inkjet, right? But if they're doing bulk color copies, then we need to go color laser, right? Devices that connect, again, our external things like our flash drives, our external hard drives. We've got scanners as well, guys. Again, we have touched on these things. And then this is very important because this is one thing that trips up a lot of you consistently. There's a difference between being visually impaired and blind. I am visually impaired. You see these glasses. I am visually impaired. If I wasn't, I would, chat to you like this and I'd have beautiful vision, but I don't. Okay. But I'm not blind. So visually impaired, what can you do on the PC to help me work with the PC in a way that caters to my needs? I can have a large keyboard. I can have a bigger display. You can use a magnifier to increase the size of the icons and, everything else on the screen. I don't use Braille. I'm not blind, right? If I'm blind, I'm going to use a Braille keyboard. I'm going to use a Braille printer. That's fine. Hearing impaired is different to being deaf. Most of you don't listen in class, so you are hearing impaired. Okay? You are not deaf. You are just hearing impaired. Don't worry. It's fine. You'll get over it. Okay? So for someone who's hearing impaired, we'll turn up the volume. Someone who's deaf, we're going to use vibration devices. We're going to use more, visual signals. Why? Because the person's not blind. Guys, don't confuse this. If someone is deaf, they are not blind. Read your question. Okay? And then we have folks who have motor control issues. Someone might be paralyzed. Someone might have poor motor control. That means that they can't even grip things properly because they don't have fine motor skills. They don't have the ability to actually send that signal from the brain properly and have it grip that device. So you could have eye movement devices, head movement devices, large keyboards, trackballs, any of these things. But please differentiate between these different things. Right. And then I think the last, still here. The value of ICT, again, they touch on what we, some of the things that we did chat about earlier on. So that's fine. Yeah, we know all this now. Gone through all of these things. Accessibility is what we were talking about earlier as well. ICT makes knowledge and resources accessible to anyone and everyone, regardless of who they are or where they are from as well. Okay, so accessibility, big thing when it comes to ICT. Then they chat a little bit about some new technology. We know that a lot of the new tech will be smaller, cheaper, faster. Not always cheaper, sometimes more expensive, but it's got more sensors. It's able to do more. It should have a longer battery life. Doesn't this sound like a cell phone advert? Sounds like a cell phone advert. But anyway, that's what it is. And then they combine everything to give you a device that it's easier to use, that's more effective, and can just do so much more for you. All right, the module 1.4, last one we talk about software. We know software are programs that perform specific instructions, right? Now we've got our hardware in place, we've bought our PC, but we want to choose the right software. How do we do that? We've got to look at the purpose of the software. Here they tell us many applications that can perform the tasks you want it to perform. So what do you want the software to do, right? Notepad, for example, can be used to write anything, but Word gives you more features. Okay, so that's a reason why you'd be using Notepad, or a reason why you'd be sitting using Word. You might want to use Photoshop because you have a need to do those things, right? We have, this is very important, your web-based applications versus your installed applications. So when you have an installed application, it's one that's physically installed onto your hard drive. It's taking up space on the hard drive. It doesn't use the internet or anything like that. It's installed on your PC, and there you go. You can run it anytime you want to, anywhere. With a web-based application, it means that the program sits on the internet. So in order to open it, in order to use it, in order to make use of it, like Google Sheets, you will need to, unfortunately, have a connection to the internet. It's beautiful that it doesn't take up space on your hard drive. You can access it from anywhere you want to, as long as you have an internet connection, but that in itself can pose a problem. So just bear that in mind. And then they give us a few examples like the ones that I just mentioned now about Google Sheets, Google Calendar, all these things. It is beautiful to have these things, but just understand the limitations around it. Then you've got subscription-based software. Now this is software. In fact, let me put it to you this way. And this is a question that came up in the test, right? The test that I did in the other video. Go check it out, guys, please. You'll see what I'm talking about. Traditional licensing models and your subscription software. So your subscription software says, well, this is software you can use, but you are basically renting, right? So like you have a subscription to Netflix. You subscribe to Netflix, you pay, you get the service. You pay maybe once a year or maybe once a month to utilize this particular software. So Office 365 is an example of that. Whereas your traditional licensing says you buy it once off. So you pay once and never again, and you use it for the rest of your life. That's the difference between those two pieces of software, and you need to know that. When it comes to software, we also need to look at compatibility. Will it be compatible with the operating system we are using? Will it be compatible with the phone that we are using? Some apps, some programs are not compatible with the hardware that we have. And then they also mention system requirements. Now, this is something we touched on in grade 11 as well. So again, you can go have a look through this. But this, you must know, because this is very important. This can constitute something like 20 or 30 marks of your paper, because they can ask you a lot of questions just based on system requirements. They can give you a scenario based on those PC specs. When we talk about the system requirements, what we are essentially saying is, what does the software need from the hardware in order to run at its best? Yeah, they're telling you the type of processor it needs, the amount of memory it needs, the hard drive space it needs, the graphics card it needs, even the operating system and an internet connection. If you have all these things and better, it will run at its absolute best. If you don't, well, you can expect a couple of problems here and there along the way. All right, then we have our application software. All right, our application, these are our apps, again, performing specific instructions. We have Office suites that include things like word processing, spreadsheets, presentations, and database. We know that. We're currently working in one. Okay, so we know that. You've also got productivity software for the mobile user, where there are lightweight versions of the productivity software. So sometimes you'll get a version of, let's say, Adobe Acrobat or Photoshop for your phone, but it's a lightweight version of the actual product that you'd use on your PC. But things like automatic meetings, scheduling, video conferencing, note taking, all these different things, again, to improve and assist with productivity. Please read the question. Please. Okay. Reference software. This is helping you to find information, right? We've got web browsers. Please know the difference between a web browser, a search engine, and a website. The web browser is a piece of software. It allows you to navigate on the internet. Your website is a collection of related web pages put together. It's based on the internet, right? Your search engine, again, that is software inside a website that allows you to search for particular things. Please don't say a search engine is Google Chrome or web browser is Google. Please don't confuse those things. We've got email software as well, like Gmail and Microsoft Outlook and Yahoo Mail. There's document management software. So guys, you can just go through the different types of software. We also have voice recognition software. Again, this falls under accessibility. So the person might have some sort of disability, and we want to give them, because they maybe have no motor skills, and they can use voice recognition software to give verbal instructions to the PC as to what to do. Just understand it has its limitations. So yeah, go through that. If I can just give you an example, when I see this now, Siri. How many of you actually use Siri? And why don't you use Siri more? Simply because you've got to change the way you speak in order for Siri to register and understand what you are saying. So it needs time to actually pick up and learn your voice. Right. So there's note-taking software. You have different things. You've got education or training software as well. Please go check out the test again. There was a question based on these things to understand what is the difference between note-taking software, programs that deal with taking notes, helping you do that, educational software, right, or training software, programs that are going to help you with education and training. What does that mean? If I'm studying online, that's education. So when I study online, I can work at my own pace. I can access it anywhere I want to. I can work in different groups online as well. So there are a lot of advantages to that. Right, again, all these others you can just go through. And then they mention fixing software problems. This is important. Things that did come up. Freezing programs. How do you sort them out? You can use Control-Alt-Delete to get to your task manager and shut the program down. Right? So that is usually the main way without shutting down the PC. So listen to the scenario. Listen to the question. They want you to solve a program or sort out a program that's sort of frozen, but you don't want to shut down the entire PC. Control-Alt-Delete to get to your task manager is the way. If the software crashes, you can reboot the whole system. You can reboot the program. Maybe uninstall the program and reinstall it again, right? There are different ways to handle that. And then when it comes to read-only files, please just remember that this is an attribute that's been added to the file. You can remove that attribute. You can save it as a different name, and that read-only attribute falls away, right? So please just, again, read through those. Then also know the difference between a bug and a virus. I think they do talk about a bug and a virus. A bug is a problem with the software. It's picked up some other little problem. That's what they call it, a bug. They are not viruses. They are mistakes. A virus is malicious software. It's done on purpose. It's there to harm you. Okay? So please, this is why a lot of people want, or a lot of companies force people to update their software so that they can eliminate these bugs when they do find it. And then also they chat a bit about the user-centered design. This relates more to HTML, looking at things like the layout and readability, the font and color, all these types of things. And they just mention here some of the steps to include in the process of user-centered design. Put the user's need first. This is what Apple did, and this is why they're so successful. They put the user's need first. what is best for the user in their hand. What is best in terms of the user operating the phone. This is why Apple has a totally different feel to any other phone. Okay, not advocating Apple. Used to be an Apple boy. Okay, now I've moved on. They just become a bit too expensive for me. Test them on real users to find out, is it working? Repeat this process and refine it. This is why you have phones sometimes coming out in like a beta version or software coming out in a beta version. Companies want you to test it, tell them what's wrong, and so they can work out all these bugs before releasing it to the general public. Right, guys, and I think that is it from me. So it looks like that sorts everything out for our modules 1.1 to 1.4. Thank you so much for joining me. Please go over now. I hope I'm going to put it up here, or the link will be somewhere. Please go and check out that test. You'll see how it relates to everything we've just